cameras. Hello. Happy Sunday, everyone. Are we up and running? I think we are. Let's see here. This is the Creative Control Room Podcast pre-show. This is the part of the show where I go through and make sure I do a systems check. And actually, we're going to go live on Instagram today as well. So this is a part of the show you won't see or hear in the audio version of the podcast. And it's where I go through, make sure all systems are go. We check our camera angles here. Where's OBS? There we go. Good. OBS is good. Drop frames, none. Camera 3, fantastic. Audio looks good. I'm going to go ahead and hit record. Got Instagram up and running. Going to check and make sure that we are up and running on the Facebooks and the Twitters. And if you've watched the show before, you will notice that it is no longer called the Hafey Digital Podcast, and that is what we will be talking about today. Looks like we're up and running on Twitter. We are up and running on Facebook. Fantastic. I've got a new intro today, and I'm hoping, well, a new monologue, I guess you would call it. And hopefully I won't forget it. Let's see here. So, okay. We are recording. We are streaming. We're recording there. Audio looks good. Camera angles look good. All the lights are on. Feel like I'm forgetting something, but that's okay. All right. I think we can go ahead and get started. Before we do, though, Trevor Stone, what's up on Instagram? He says, let's go. Let's do this. It should be a fun one today. I'm actually really excited to talk about what we're going to be talking about. All right. Let's try this intro. Let's see if I can get it done on the first try, shall we? Hello and welcome to episode number 76, which is actually also episode number 1 of the Creative Control Room Podcast, a show for creators, makers, and doers. And my goal is to help you make to the max. I'm your operator, Ryan Hafey, and we don't have an intro today because we haven't made a new intro. But in this episode, we're going to talk all about why I have rebranded from the Hafey Digital Podcast to the Creative Control Room Podcast. So a new intro is coming, but for now, we'll just turn on the applause. Hey, if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening, and follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to swing by after the show and leave me a message, ask me a question, just say what's up, whatever's on your mind. It's all good. If you are new to the podcast, again, we've just changed names. This is the inaugural episode of the Creative Control Room Podcast. And this is my creative control room. This is where I do all my creative stuff. I talk a lot about photography, video creation, podcasting, live streaming, FPV, and everything basically in between. And this is where I also document my progress through the various projects that I happen to be working on at any given time. So if that's something that you're into, it'd be great to have you follow along. So hit that subscribe button. So anyway, we have nothing on the agenda today except for talking about this podcast rebranding. So again, what used to be known as the Hafey Digital Podcast is no more. Now it is the Creative Control Room Podcast. And I'm going to tell you why I decided to rebrand, as well as how I went about doing it and kind of what all went into it, the thinking behind the color scheme and the logos and everything that went into it. So first of all, let's jump into exactly why did I rebrand the podcast. So for a little context, back in 2017, I formed my LLC, which is Hafey Digital LLC. It's my company. The original intention back then was, I was starting to get a little bit of client work, and I figured, well, might as well set up a corporation to handle all that client work. And my original intention was I will create a YouTube channel, a podcast that kind of supplements that drives traffic to that business. And as I went along, and I've told this story before, but as I went along, I realized that I kind of want it to be the other way around. I was doing a lot of client work that I wasn't super hyped on, and I didn't have a whole lot of control over the kind of work I did. I just kind of had to take what was available to me because, I wanted to make some money. But I wasn't doing the projects that I really wanted to do. So I decided to kind of flip it, and I wanted to start focusing more on the podcast and on content creation to eventually get to a place where maybe I can have a little bit more of a say in the type of work that I'm doing and the clients that I'm working with. So naturally, though, when I started the initial podcast, the Hafey Digital Podcast seemed like a natural name because it was the name of my company. Awesome. The problem with that is that there's not a lot of name recognition behind Hafey Digital. And just hearing Hafey Digital, you probably, unless you knew who I am or what I do, you may not know what Hafey Digital was all about. So I thought it was time to change the name of, at least of the podcast. And I actually may go back and change the name of my primary YouTube channel, which just shares my name currently, Ryan Hafey. But I may make it the Creative Control Room YouTube channel. I'm not sure yet. I haven't gotten that far. Right now, I'm just focusing on the podcast. But I wanted something that, when people hear the name of it, it tells you a little bit more about what I do and what I'm into, what the podcast is all about. So that was really the reasoning behind all of that. And so here we are. And I put this off for a little while. I know I've talked about doing this rebrand for a number of episodes now. And it was finally this past week where I just sat down and started getting work on it. And it's interesting how those things work. It's like, just with all projects, you kind of put them off. And then the moment that you start on them, the more interested you get. Like, at least that's how it works for me. Like I'll put off a project. I don't want to put, it's such a weird thing, isn't it? It's like, here's something that you're putting off doing, but then that when you get started on it, you're going to enjoy the process. Like building anything, that's what I love to really do. I love to just build stuff from scratch. But I think I enjoy the results of that effort more. Well, no, because I like the process too. It's just, for whatever reason, with that lizard brain always talking in my ear, the hardest part is just getting started. But once you get started, the snowball gets rolling and it becomes a lot of fun. And I had a lot of fun with this project. So let's start by talking first about the colors. So you've probably seen the thumbnail. I will also pull this up here on the screen, just kind of give you a better view of that. So this is what the new podcast creative. So if you subscribe, for example, on any podcast player or anything like that, this will be the art that you see. It will no longer be that black and red sort of ugly looking icon that I really haven't been a fan of for a while. So that's what it looks like. And let's talk first about the colors. There's obviously a clear color scheme here. You've got kind of a black, a white, and like a teal, a red, and a green. Now, I picked these colors based on colors that you can kind of see in my office space here. So there's obviously some hints of red. We've got the red panels here. We've got these red lights. If you're on Instagram, you may not be able to see this. And I'm afraid to move my phone because it's very delicately placed on top of a tripod right now and it could easily fall. But I've got some lights underneath my shelves, the red. And then back here, obviously this light is always teal. And I had this light. I like the contrast that it creates. So that was the reasoning behind the teal coloring. And then this sort of art project up here, I was looking for one additional color to go with. And there's a lot of kind of like a forest green. I'm a fan of forest greens, so I threw that one in there as well. But the way that I came up with the specific colors that I picked, go back to the screen view here. So this is the actual color palette right here. And I was able to find these on a website called coolors.com or coolors.co, I guess, COOLORS.co. And the way the website works is let's just go there. Let's just go to the website. How about, maybe that'll be easier. I'll just show you. Coolors.co. Okay. Howdy, blah, 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 blah. What's new? Let's cancel out of that. Let's start the generator. So the way that this works is you kind of pick a color that you like. And I'm trying to remember how to do it. No, I don't want to remove it. I want to not drag, copy, toggle. No. How do we forget how to? Oh, here we go. So you can kind of, every time you hit the space bar, you're given a new color scheme. So what I did, I kind of waited till I found a color red that I liked. So let's say it was this color. I'm like, oh, I like the way that red looks. So then you can lock this in place. Now you go to the next one here and you find another color that you like. So in my case, I was looking for kind of a teal color. And let's say that, oh, I just missed it, but you get the idea. So you kind of keep going, and the colors that it presents are designed to work together. They're designed to be complementary of each other. So I just kind of went through this until I found a shade of the different colors that I was looking for, and that is how I ended up with this color scheme here. So the red, the green, and the teal correspond to colors here. And then I wanted a black and a white, but I didn't want full black and full white. I wanted a little bit off color. And obviously this is helpful too. For example, in this case of my channel art here, if I switched the background and I went with the black background, I could change, the and a podcast and the color in this logo to the white, and I can use it on a dark or a light background. So that's kind of the reasoning behind the color scheme. So let's talk about the name, the Creative Control Room Podcast. So I had played around with a few different name options for a little while, and one of them was Make to the Max podcast, which is already part of my slogan, I guess, or intro. You've probably heard me say more. My goal is to help you make to the max. Yeah, that's right. Thought about that a little bit more. Thought it might be a little bit redundant, but in some of my pre-shows that I do, I've referred to this office space as kind of my control room or my control center, where I do all my creative projects, basically. So creative control room can be read kind of a few different ways. You have creative control, which is something we're all of us creative people enjoy. You have control room, which is kind of what I consider this location. And then put them all together, you have the creative control room. That's kind of it. So I thought that fit well. As you also heard me in the intro, I can kind of spin that off into, I am the operator. I'm the control room operator of this control room, this creative control room that I am in command of. So that's kind of, that's where the name came from. I like it. Trying to think if there were any other names that, I had even given thought to. I think that's pretty much it. After I sort of decided that the Make to the Max podcast was not going to work, this was pretty much the next name that I came up with, and I ended up being pretty happy with it. Now, text logo-wise, I play with a couple different iterations here. In fact, this was one. So this is obviously the final version that I came up with, this one here. But this is one that I liked the most here, but the problem with this one is probably pretty, immediately clear. Reading this title is a little bit more difficult. I've seen people use this kind of text wrapping where, they just make the text different colors and then kind of piece it together into a certain shape, in this case, more of a rectangle. But typically that's done effectively with names that maybe aren't quite as long. So I posted it up on Instagram and Twitter and asked for some feedback on the name. And the feedback was that it's a little harder to read than people would like. I was a little bummed, again, just because I like the way that this is presented a little bit more than this. But at the end of the day, I don't want people to have to struggle to read the name of the podcast. So thank you to everyone who gave the feedback. But this is what we came up with there. So that's the name. The font that I'm using here is Montserrat, or however it's pronounced. This is actually the same font that I use for my previous logo, my previous podcast, the Hafey Digital Podcast. And just to keep Hafey Digital alive, because it is my company, I do have at the bottom here a Hafey Digital Podcast. Who knows? Maybe we'll expand that out. Maybe we'll create a podcast network in the future. You never know. So that's the podcast name. Let's talk about the logo for a little bit. So I was very happy with how this turned out. So initially, the way, and I'll bring up a bigger version of the logo here. Get a little bit bigger. Oop. There we go. So initially, I was going to just try to make a logo. My default anytime I need to make some kind of a logo is to make some kind of a text-based logo. So I was initially going to try and just, maybe like make a logo out of TCCRP, the initials of the podcast. But I didn't like how it was turning out. I couldn't figure out a good way to do it. So there's another website that I was on, and I forget what that one was called too. Let's see, logo idea generator. I think it was something like that, just to get some inspiration. And no, I can't remember which one it is, but basically it's a cool website in that it allows you to go through and you type in the name of whatever you're trying to make a logo for. You can determine which colors you like. I think you can determine the colors. And then you're given a page where there's a bunch of different random logos presented to you. And you select the styles that you like. And then after that, it gives you a number of different options of logos with your branding name in them. And you can kind of choose the one you like. And as I was going through trying to figure out what would make a good logo for a podcast called The Creative Control Room, I saw one logo that somewhat resembled this shape here. So I decided to remake it with a little bit of a tweak of my own. And why I like this so much, first of all, if you notice the colors correspond to the text portion of the logo. So the Creative Control Room Podcast. So the colors kind of go in the same order if you were reading them from left to right, top to bottom, as the text logo there. Also, you can also look at this logo like it can create two different shapes depending on how you choose to look at it. For starters, it can look like the letter C facing itself front and back. So C, which would correspond with creative control, which I thought was kind of neat. But also, you can look at this as if it were a room with four walls. So you're kind of looking from a upward perspective down into this room, the room being the creative control room. So yeah, depending on how you look at it, it can either be two C's or it can appear as though you are looking into a room. And I have some interesting ideas for how I want to animate this, because if you've seen the previous logo or the previous intro that I had a little After Effects animation that I did with the Hafey Digital logo that I thought looked kind of cool. And I want to do something similar. I'm also considering the idea, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I have some ideas that we'll get into shortly. So that's kind of, that's the reasoning behind why I did the logo the way that I did. And then obviously, another thing just to kind of drive home what the podcast is about and make sure that there's no confusion. Like if you saw this artwork, you would get a pretty good idea right off the top of your head what it was for. Obviously, you can Creative Control Room, but then I included these icons over here, and a camera. This symbol is kind of like a broadcast or live streaming. Obviously, a microphone. We're talking, it's a podcast. Some audio waveforms and a little drone in there because we talk about some FPV stuff every now and then as well. So the hope is, and the feedback that I've gotten, by the way, so far has been really great. As far as what people think about the presentation and everything. So I'm hoping a couple things. One, people who discover my podcast, whether they're, on search or however it may be, that they know right away what I'm all about, just based on the name and the creative. And two, I'm hoping that this will kind of springboard me into doing things a little bit differently. And I should also back up. When it comes to the podcast format itself, I don't anticipate a whole lot changing because the content's all going to be the same. It's all going to be based around this space here. It's all going to be based around the things that I've been talking about, all 75 prior episodes. So, I may incorporate a few new things. I may move a few things around as we go, but I think this was also necessary just from the standpoint of, the Hafey Digital Podcast was 75 episodes of basically the same exact thing. It was just, it was starting to get a little bit old, a little monotonous. So this is kind of a way for me to really get inspired again to try some new and interesting things. So, and because the format and the subject matter is generally going to be the same, we're not going to start from scratch. I'm not starting a new YouTube channel. In fact, like I said in the beginning, this is episode 76. It's a continuation of the previous podcast. It's just going under a new wrapping paper, a new name, a new face. And I guess, though, now that I've committed to wearing the red beanie in the podcast art, it's got to be kind of part of my shtick now, right? It only makes sense. In fact, it was Robert Reed, who may or may not be watching currently, who called that out to me and suggested that might be something that I include as just kind of part of my branding. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna stick with it as long as it's still cool enough in this room to do that, because it does get very hot in this room. But anyway, so there was that, and then this headshot was actually from a photo shoot I did of myself towards the end of last year. This was actually shot on a red background. I just kind of cut myself out of that. But this was initially going to be, Robert is watching. What's up, Robert? So this was initially going to be a photo shoot for, actually, yeah, I think I did do this photo shoot as part of a rebrand or with the intention of using them for the rebrand. But I think previous to coming up with this look, I was still planning on going with like the red background, which is why I shot these portraits on red background. But I had a different portrait that I shot here where I'm kind of looking back into the side as if I was looking back at the name of the actual podcast. But then I thought of the icons, adding the icons in there, and I wondered, did I happen to take a headshot where I'm looking up? And lo and behold, I did. So this worked out really well, and I thought it all just came together quite nicely. So that's it. That's the that's the whole story behind the name of the new podcast. So with that out of the way, let's also talk a little bit about what I needed to do to finish the rebranding. Obviously, you can come up with the logo, you can come up with your podcast art, but then you have to execute. You have to throw it out into the world, and that requires putting a few new things together. So again, if you have gone to the YouTube channel, you will have seen that I have created, let's bring this over here. I have created some new channel art. So, and this header, it may change over time. This is actually the full header image. So this is, and you can download like the YouTube channel art template, and it'll tell you where you should put certain elements. Travis says, dude, love the new podcast art, very clean. Thanks, Travis, appreciate that. So this is the very simple YouTube art that I came up with. And typically speaking, on most screens, you're only going to see this portion of it anyway. But that worked well here. And then for the profile picture, I just went ahead and used basically this portion of it and just added a little bit of color to the icons that I used in there. And I'm lukewarm on this profile picture as well, so I may change it at some point. But for now, I'm okay with it. But that's just one piece of creative that you have to create in order to really kind of push it out. Also had to create. I had to change the URL of my YouTube channel. So if you type in, formerly it was youtube.com/Hafey Digital Podcast, but now you can just type youtube.com TCCRP, and it will go to straight to the channel. Now, the thing about that is YouTube will tell you, like I think it's like 100 subscribers. If you get 100 subscribers on your YouTube channel, you can create a custom URL, and they tell you as soon as you change this, you can never change it again, which isn't true. All you really have to do, let me come back here. All you really have to do is just do like a support chat, which is easy to find. And you're just like, hey, I just rebranded. I'd like to change the URL. And as long as the URL is available, they'll do it for you. So I chatted with someone, and they sent me an email and said, hey, we've reserved that URL for you. Just go into your customization settings and change it there. And lo and behold, we now have a custom URL for the YouTube channel, new custom branding, and it's all there. I've already gone in and adjusted like the upload defaults with the links and the titles and things like that, tags in my videos, all that kind of stuff. Let's see, was there anything else? Word mark. Yeah, just a lot of different, this right here, this folder is this one. It's just a folder of some of the different creative assets that I was working on. So you obviously have the logo. There were a couple different versions of the logo. There's actually the initial podcast art. The very first version that I did was this one here. And I had the all black logo, which I decided to obviously change up. Let's see, you've got logo vector, profile picture, YouTube channel art. Also had to create a new, actually I didn't need to do that, but I will. I had to create a new Photoshop thumbnail template because we can't use the Hafey Digital one anymore. So this is what I came up with. Again, very heavy on the brand colors. And I thought this came out pretty well. And that's it. That's the branding. That's I think that's about everything. What is it? How are we doing? 27 minutes today. So, fun project. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I'm very excited to see where we go from here with this, because now I kind of have a renewed. I'm newly inspired to really make this a thing, and I'm hoping that this will kind of be what springboards me into bigger things when it comes to this podcast. So, a fun project. Thank you for watching. I hope that helped. And by the way, I don't consider myself an expert by any means when it comes to branding or logo design. I've just picked some things up over the years. So if you think that all of this looks like crap, then you're probably right. But if you like it, thanks. I appreciate that. I put a lot of thought into it. I worked pretty hard on it. And all things considered, I thought it came out pretty good, given my current skill set. And I'm one of those people who likes to do everything myself. And one thing we didn't talk about is the intro. The previous intro, as I mentioned, as I'm sure you've seen before, this is little animation with some music that I picked up from Artlist a while back, and I've just been using the same intro animation and music for a long time. What I want to do, the idea that I have, I close the folder, let me open it back up here. The idea that I have, and it's sort of half-baked at this point. I still have to go in and play around with it a little bit in After Effects. But I want to be able to animate this to where it's rotating on kind of, because it's not at a flat axis. It's kind of at this axis. So I want to recreate this in After Effects and then be able to rotate it 360 degrees, and then maybe reveal the text logo from that in some way. We're going to figure it out, but currently that is beyond my skill set at the moment. So I'm trying to figure out how I can do that and make it work. And I've watched a couple videos. I think I'm getting there. But from what I understand, you essentially have to create these 4 different panels kind of individually. I want to have some depth, because I tried doing a little test run where it's just, each panel was not 3D, but obviously you see that there's some space in between them. There's some separation there. So I'm trying to create sort of 3D panels versus just, two-dimensional shapes that I can animate. So I'm working on it. It may still be a few weeks, just given how long I procrastinated doing the rebrand in the first place. It might take a little while. We may be without an intro for a little while, which is fine. But that's what I'm thinking. That's what I want to try to accomplish. I want to step it up a little bit and see if I can do a little bit better. Part of me is like, just go on Fiverr and hand off the logo and see if someone can whip it up. But you know what? If I do that, I'm not learning anything for myself. And that's kind of, for me, that's what really this is all about. I feel like if I were to outsource the work that I'm doing, it would completely defeat the purpose of what this whole podcast is about, which is really just about learning new creative things and working on creative projects and expanding my creative knowledge. So that's that. So the intro, give me a few weeks on that. We're going to work on that. We're going to make some custom music, and it's going to be cool, and you're going to like it. At least I hope so. But with that said, I think that about covers everything I wanted to mention about the podcast, Rebrand. Next week, we will be back with some regularly scheduled programming, talking about more creative stuff. But if you're still here with me, and if you enjoyed what you saw, if I brought you any value, it would be awesome if you could hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening. And be sure to follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to swing by, ask me a question, or just say what's up. And last week I had a rhyme that went with that, and I forgot what it was, but that's okay. So this I didn't really think about how to end the show now that I don't have an outro, but I guess just thanks for watching, and we will